I've never been the type of person who looks for trouble. I've always lived a pretty quiet life, kept to myself, and tried to avoid anything that felt even slightly unsafe. I'm 26 now, but this happened when I had just turned 23, back when I was still figuring things out, still working different jobs, still moving from place to place trying to find something steady. That year, I booked a weekend trip to a small cabin in northern Idaho. It wasn't supposed to be anything special. I just needed some time off from work, a place where I could turn my phone off, breathe for a little while, and get away from the constant noise of living near the city. I'd never stayed alone in a cabin before, but a coworker told me it was relaxing, and I thought it would be a good change of pace. The cabin looked simple in the photos. One bedroom, a little porch, a fire pit out front, trees on all sides. A lake just a few minutes down a narrow trail. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Just a place where I could clear my mind for 2 days and reset before going back to reality. I remember the drive up there was peaceful. Quiet highways, small towns, long stretches of empty road where it felt like I was the only person out there. The kind of drive where you put on some music and let your thoughts drift. It was early fall, so the air had that cold, clean smell. The trees were starting to turn orange. Nothing felt strange or threatening. It just felt like a quiet weekend waiting for me. When I finally reached the cabin, everything looked exactly like the pictures. A little older maybe. The porch steps creaked. The door stuck a bit when I opened it. But it didn't bother me. It felt lived in, not abandoned. The inside was small but clean. A couch, a small kitchen, a bed that looked like it had been there for years. There was even a little welcome note from whoever managed the place. I unpacked, made some coffee, and walked around the property. The woods were calm, the kind of calm where you can hear every small noise. Wind through branches, water dripping from leaves, the lake moving somewhere in the distance. I didn't see anyone. Not a single person or car. It was exactly the kind of solitude I had been wanting. But even then, during those first few hours, there was this tiny feeling I couldn't explain. Like something wasn't completely right. Not something obvious, not a person watching me or a sound that scared me. Just a small shift in the atmosphere, like the air was a little heavier near the cabin than it was by the trees. I brushed it off at first, told myself it was all in my head. But later that night, I would think back to that moment and realize that the cabin wasn't as empty as I believed. Something was already there, and it had been waiting. The cabin sat at the end of a long gravel road, tucked between tall fir trees that blocked out most of the afternoon light. The place wasn't big, just one main room with a small kitchenette, a narrow hallway, and a bedroom at the back. Everything inside felt old but steady, like it had been used by countless weekend travelers before me. The wooden floors were worn down from footsteps, and the windows had these thin beige curtains that swayed even when the air was still. Outside, the forest felt endless. Thick trees, heavy branches, and patches of tall grass that rustled quietly whenever the wind picked up. I remember standing on the porch that first evening and noticing just how far the nearest house might be. It wasn't close. You couldn't hear cars or voices, or anything that suggested people lived nearby. Just the sound of the woods settling. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon, when the sun was still out but starting its slow drop toward the hills. The light felt soft, almost orange, the kind that makes everything look calm. I figured I'd spend the evening unpacking, eating something simple, and going over a few work emails before shutting off my phone for the rest of the weekend. That was the whole point of this trip, to disconnect, reset my mind, and get a little distance from the stress of my job. At the time, I was working long shifts at a small tech company, mostly doing support work. Calls, emails, troubleshooting. It felt like my whole life was just staring at screens. The cabin was supposed to be the opposite of that. No pressure, no deadlines, no noise except what nature made. I thought a couple of days away would help me feel normal again. There weren't any important characters on this trip. No friends, no partner, no coworkers meeting me there.
It was just me.
That was the whole idea, solitude. A chance to breathe without anyone asking me for anything. The only interaction I'd had was with the rental manager earlier that morning when he texted me the door code and told me that cell service might drop in and out. He said if anything came up, I could message him, but it might take time for his reply to come through. I didn't think much of it. Inside the cabin, everything was set up simply. A small table near the window, a couch with an old blanket thrown over the back, and a little metal lamp that flickered when I plugged it in. The kitchen had just enough supplies for a short trip, some pots, a set of mismatched cups, and a fridge that hummed louder than it probably should have. There was nothing strange or unsettling about the place at first. Just quiet. Deep, heavy quiet that you only get far away from traffic and people. I made dinner, washed the dishes, and sat outside for a while listening to the river somewhere behind the trees. Everything felt normal. Completely normal. And maybe that's why I didn't notice the signs right away, the subtle things that hinted someone else had been inside that cabin before I arrived. And maybe they hadn't left. The first strange thing I noticed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was small, so small that at the time I almost convinced myself I imagined it. I had finished unpacking and was sitting at the little table by the window, making a list of things I wanted to do the next day. The sun had already dipped behind the trees, and the cabin lights gave everything a warm, yellow glow. That's when I heard something faint from the hallway. Just a soft tap. One quick sound. I stopped writing and listened for a second, but nothing followed. Cabins make noises all the time, so I brushed it off. But about a minute later, I heard it again, this time more like a small knock against wood. Not loud, not sharp, like someone accidentally brushing against a door with their hand. I stepped into the hallway and checked both doors, the bathroom and the bedroom. Everything looked normal. There were no signs of movement, no draft, no loose items hanging that might have bumped the wall. The house was still. When I went back to the table, I noticed something else. My backpack, was sitting a little differently than before. I always place it upright, leaning against the chair leg. But now it was turned slightly, like it had been nudged or shifted a few inches. I tried to remember if I had moved it earlier without thinking, but I couldn't. It wasn't a big thing, just a subtle change. Still, it gave me a strange feeling, like something was off. About 15 minutes later, while I was heating water for tea, I heard a sound from the porch. It wasn't footsteps, more like the wooden boards settling under weight. A slow, steady creak. I turned off the stove and stood perfectly still. The porch made the noise again. Then it stopped. I peered through the kitchen window. The porch light had a dim motion sensor, but it didn't turn on. Everything outside looked dark and empty, just layers of trees pressed together like a wall. I didn't see a person or an animal, but the sound had been so clear that my body reacted before my brain did. I felt that sudden tightness in my chest, the kind that comes when you sense someone close by even if you can't see them. I told myself it must have been the wind. Or maybe the boards were old and reacted to temperature changes. It was the kind of explanation that sounds reasonable enough to calm you down as long as you don't think too hard about it. Later that night, when I went to the bathroom, I noticed the shower curtain was pulled halfway closed. I always keep shower curtains fully open. Always. For some reason, seeing it half-drawn bothered me more than the sounds earlier. I reached out and pushed it aside, half expecting something to be behind it. But there was nothing. Just a small draft of cold air drifting up from the drain. Individually, none of these things meant danger. But together, they built this slow, creeping awareness in the back of my mind, something subtle, quiet, almost polite. Like the cabin was trying to get my attention. And I wasn't sure why. By the time it was fully dark outside, the cabin felt different. Not louder, not colder, just heavier, like the air had gained weight. I kept telling myself it was just the isolation getting to me, but every time I tried to relax, something else happened that pushed the tension a little further. The first clear sign of danger came around 9 p.m. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone, barely one bar of service, when I heard someone step onto the porch. This time it wasn't the slow creaking from earlier. It was an actual footstep. Solid. Firm. Like a boot hitting wood. I froze. Another step followed, this one closer to the door. I waited for a knock, or a voice, or anything, but the porch went silent again. I walked over to the window slowly, and peeked through the curtain. Nothing. Just darkness and the faint outline of trees. But when I stepped away, the cabin floors gave a soft vibration, like someone else inside had moved their weight. I stood perfectly still, trying to figure out where the feeling came from. Then it hit again, this time from a hallway.
Not a sound.
A presence. I turned on every light I could and checked the hallway. Both doors were closed. Everything looked like it had before. But that tight feeling in my chest wouldn't let go. It felt like someone was standing just out of sight, waiting for me to return to the couch so they could move again. Around 10, I locked the front door for the third time, making sure the latch clicked all the way. That's when I noticed the kitchen window, the one facing the trees. The curtain was open. I hadn't touched it. I knew I hadn't. I always keep curtains closed at night, especially in unfamiliar places. The window didn't look broken or forced, but the curtain rod had been pushed higher on one side, like someone had lifted it to look in. I stood there staring at it, trying to convince myself it was crooked earlier, and I just hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I tried calling the rental manager again, but the signal dropped. I tried texting him, but the message wouldn't send. I even tried calling a friend, but nothing went through. For the first time that night, I felt genuinely trapped. The cabin was surrounded by miles of woods, no neighbors, no lights, and barely any phone service. And whoever or whatever was moving around outside knew that. They knew I was alone. Around midnight, I heard the porch again. This time it wasn't footsteps. It was slow breathing. Heavy, controlled breathing coming from the other side of the front door. I could hear it clearly through the wood. I backed away one step, then another. The breathing stopped. A soft whisper followed. "I see you." The voice was low, calm, almost conversational. Like the person wasn't trying to scare me. They were stating a fact. That's when I realized the worst part. They weren't trying to break in. Not yet. They were waiting. Waiting for something. Or waiting for me to make the wrong move. The moment I heard that whisper, soft, steady, almost too calm, I felt something change inside me. It wasn't panic exactly. It was a cold, controlled kind of fear that made my hands shake, but kept my mind clear enough to think. I knew I couldn't stay near the front door. Whoever was out there was close enough to hear me breathe. I stepped backward slowly, keeping my eyes on the door. The cabin felt too quiet. Even the forest outside had gone still, like everything was waiting to see what I would do next. I grabbed my phone from the table, but the screen showed no service. Not even one faint bar this time. That's when the handle on the front door moved. Just a slight pull. Then another. I hadn't realized how thin the door felt until that moment. The wood seemed to bend a little, like someone was testing it, checking how much force it would take to break it. I backed all the way into the hallway, keeping my steps light. The door rattled. Then a hand, an actual hand, pressed against the small window panel near the top. Pale skin, long fingers, the outline of a wrist. They were trying to see inside. I ducked into the bedroom and locked the door, even though I knew it wouldn't do much. The lock was just a small twist latch, something meant for privacy, not safety. I pushed a dresser against the door as quietly as I could and crouched by the window that faced the side yard. For a few seconds, everything went silent again.
No breathing. No footsteps. No rattling.
I almost thought the person had left. But then the porch boards creaked again, this time moving toward the side of the cabin. I heard fingers tap lightly against the bedroom. One tap.
Pause.
Another. The glass was thin enough that I could feel the vibration in the floor. I held my breath, hoping they couldn't see inside. The curtains were closed, but there was a small gap on the left side. I didn't dare peek through it. Then the tapping stopped, and I heard something worse, gravel crunching. They were walking around the cabin toward the back. Toward the small window I had opened earlier to let some air in. I crawled to it fast. The latch was loose. The window wasn't fully shut. I could feel cold air drifting in. If they reached it before I locked it, they could easily pull it open from the outside. I slammed it shut and dropped the latch, just as something tugged from the other side.
Hard.
The window shook. A hand slid up against the glass. I couldn't see a face, but I saw the outline of a shoulder leaning in, testing the frame. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and the flashlight. There was only one way out, the back door near the kitchen. I moved as quietly as I could, staying low, listening for footsteps. The tapping returned, now from the bathroom window, sharp, Quick taps, like they were tracking my movement inside. I reached the kitchen, unlocked the door, and slipped outside. The air was freezing. My breath came out in sharp clouds. I sprinted toward my car without looking back. Halfway there, I heard fast footsteps hitting the dirt. He had jumped off the porch. He was running after me. I reached the car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hand shook so badly, I almost dropped the keys. I jammed them into the ignition, turned them, and the engine hesitated just long enough for me to see a figure break out of the tree line on my left. When the engine finally roared to life, I slammed the gear into reverse and tore down the gravel road, the headlights catching a glimpse of someone standing dead center in the driveway, watching me leave. And he didn't move out of the way. Not even an inch. My lungs were burning as I sprinted down the corridor, the broken exit sign flickering above me like some dying heartbeat. I could still hear the thing behind me, those slow, dragging footsteps, as if it didn't need to hurry because it already knew I wasn't getting out. I pushed through a supply room door and slammed it shut, pressing my back against it while trying to steady my breathing. The room was dark except for a single emergency light glowing red, just enough to see shelves lined with dusty boxes and old medical files. I scanned the room for anything I could use to barricade the door, but then something else caught my eye, a metal cabinet labeled Patient Records, Restricted. It was hanging slightly open, as though someone had recently gone through it. A cold realization hit me. Why were patient files in an office building basement? My hands shook as I pulled the cabinet open. Inside were yellowed folders jammed together, but one sat on top, freshly placed clean, with my own name typed across the front. I froze. Why would my name be here? I opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were printed photos of me, leaving my house, arriving at work, walking into class months ago. Some were taken from angles only someone very close could have captured. My heartbeat thudded violently. And then I saw the last page. A medical report, a psychiatric evaluation, and a final sentence highlighted in red ink. Subject continues to show total blindness to the entity's presence. Phase 3. Physical integration approved. I felt sick. Phase 3? Physical integration? What the hell did that mean? Behind me, the emergency light flickered. A distorted reflection appeared on the metal cabinet, something tall and twisted standing in the doorway. I hadn't even heard the door open. Slowly, I turned. It was the same figure that had been stalking me. The tall, emaciated shape with limbs too long to be human. But now, up close, I could see its face, or rather, the lack of one. Smooth skin stretched across where features should be, except for its eyes. My breath caught when I saw them clearly for the first time. They were my eyes. Same color, same shape, same faint scar near the brow. No, that was impossible. The creature tilted its head, mirroring me. Every tiny movement I made, it copied like a broken reflection. My knees weakened as I slowly stepped back. Then it spoke, not out loud, but inside my head. A whisper that felt like it was crawling across my skull. You were never alone. You were part of me before you ever knew I existed. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a random haunting. It wasn't stalking me for fun. It was coming back for me. The room suddenly felt colder, as if reality itself was thinning. Memories surfaced, nightmares I had since childhood of something standing at my door, watching. Doctors telling me I had sleep hallucinations. My parents whispering behind closed doors. All lies. I wasn't imagining anything. I was being prepared. And now the thing stepped closer, lifting its long, pale hand toward my face, like it was welcoming me home. That was the moment I finally understood. The monster chasing me wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to reclaim me. The creature's hand hovered inches from my face, so close I could feel the air around it ripple, like heat waves rising from a fire. Except this wasn't warmth. This was something cold, hollow, and ancient brushing against my skin. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but my body refused to move. It wasn't paralysis. It was familiarity. A deep, instinctive recognition, like some buried part of me was waking up for the first time. The creature leaned closer until its featureless face was only a breath away from mine. Those stolen eyes, my eyes, stared into me with a kind of silent hunger. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing inward, the light dimming until everything was swallowed in a suffocating darkness. Then, a voice echoed through the hallway above us. "Hello? Is someone down here?" The spell broke. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. Its body twisted unnaturally, bones crackling like dry branches snapping in a winter storm. For the first time since I'd seen it, it hesitated, like it hadn't planned for anyone else to be here. Footsteps creaked on the floorboards above. Human footsteps. Someone was descending the stairs. I didn't know who it was, security, a janitor, another late-night worker, but they had no idea what they were walking into. The creature slowly turned back toward me. And then, with a movement almost too fast to see, it stretched its long arm upward, pressing its fingers into the ceiling as though the solid wood were nothing but soft clay. It began pulling itself upward, climbing into the dark space above. But before it disappeared completely, it paused. Its head lowered back through the hole, hanging upside down inches above me. Its mouth, where no mouth had been just moments ago, slowly split open across its smooth face. A sharp, jagged grin. And in a whisper that felt like it crawled through my spine, it said, "Not yet, but soon." Then it vanished. The ceiling closed behind it as if it had never been disturbed. I stood there trembling, barely able to breathe, as the footsteps continued down the stairs. A flashlight beam cut through the basement hallway, and a man's voice called out again. "Hey, are you all right?" I heard screaming. I opened my mouth to warn him, but no words came out. I wasn't even sure what to say, because the truth was, I didn't know where the creature went. I didn't know why it left.
I didn't know what soon meant.
The man stepped closer, his light landing on my face. "You look pale," he said. "Did you see something down here?" I finally forced out a shaky breath. But before I could speak, before I could explain anything, his flashlight flickered. Just once. Then again. And then, somewhere in the darkness above us, we heard it. A soft, slow dragging sound, moving across the ceiling, circling us. The man froze. His eyes lifted slowly upward. I didn't look. I couldn't, because deep down I already knew. It wasn't finished with me, or with anyone else in this building. And the worst part? I still have no idea what it truly wants, but it knows exactly where I am. And it's getting closer again.